Here in my hands, I have a Boxall and Edmiston. It's a real piece of recent gunmaking history, and in itself it is both absolutely beautiful and a little melancholic. But most importantly, this is something that I dreamt of holding as a younger man when they first came out. It's a 12-bore, round body, 30-inch, over and under. Let's have a look. Boxall and Edmiston's tagline was preserving the art of British gunmaking, and that they did. From 2009 to 2018 they made a couple of hundred guns, and they were beautiful. They certainly were a nice mixture of the old and the new. This particular one has a 15-inch well-figured stock. It's very pretty, a very classy piece of wood, not too loud, not too over the top, and impeccably finished as well. The checkering on this is quite coarse. The first thing you notice when you pick it up, the checkering is coarse. This is built with a lot of nods to other gun makers, and this is a very practical thing. You know, they were going for usable guns, and in the past, gun makers who made guns that were for using in rougher environments put coarse checkering on their guns. And I remember the first ones I picked up, I mean, I've seen them with fine checkering, but for the most part, that coarse checkering is beautifully cut and it's extremely practical. Fine checkering is less so. You have it's a man-sized round knob. It fills the hand perfectly, almost like a full pistol grip, but you keep the elegance and the lines, and that's something that you certainly notice. You have quite a deep body, but the way that it comes through into the neck, the bottom of the grip there, and the lines of the stock, it's very classically English. Going on to the action, I love the safety catch. It's a long flat safety with a slight raised knurled knob in the middle. I've said knob too many times in this thing, but I'm sorry, it's not funny, it's just a word. It's very positive. It is a single selective trigger. It's a very large, deep trigger guard again. This gun is very practical. It's very pleasant. Large trigger guards. You can shoot this gun with gloves in fairly rough weather, given that, I'll say that, this season and the last two seasons have been very dry and very warm, but that's not always the case. You have a deep acanthus engraving across the course of its action, and I believe this is laser done with slight hand finishing, if not entirely laser done. But it is an absolutely lovely design. Deep, classy, classic. The way that these raised sort of bolsters with the engraved name of the company on lead out into the acanthus scroll that covers the action, it's a beautifully composed thing. It's very nice. The way this is headed up, the carved back of the action, also a real lovely nod to best gun making. It's a strange sort of mixture of practical gun and a beautiful gun. So for example, there's certain things that are very fine, there's certain things that are perhaps a little bit stronger, a little bit chunkier, the trigger guard being one of them. But I love the double beading. I think that, I mean, if we're allowed to be fussy, the screw does look a touch out of place, but that's only being extremely fussy. And to be fair, say the company closed 2 years ago, to a great shame of many actually. It was part of that sort of revival, and remaking an affordable English gun was kind of their thing. But I understand that, certainly reading through the website, you can read into it, it must have been incredibly hard work to run that company, because, well, if your guns aren't £150,000, you need to sell more of them. Moving on, you have a 6mm slightly raised rib with a solid mid-rib. What that gives you between the front and the back is a slightly front-heavy gun, but actually the overall weight of this gun isn't unpleasant, and it moves extremely well, extremely well. I think a lot of that front-end weight is the fact that this action bar is actually extremely long, and the trigger is a lot further back than usual, certainly the way you hold it. But it swings well and it mounts well, and that quality of handling is a recurring theme across pretty much every Boxall I've ever held. On the top here, inlaid in gold, Boxall and Edmiston, Shrewsbury, England. Little polished section with engraving at the back, and then a filed rest of your rib with a little silver bead sight at the front. I absolutely adore the extended 4-end irons. It's always been a little pet love of mine. They do serve a certain practical purpose, mostly because this is generally the thinnest area of the 4-inch break. It's usually this segment, so they do sort of reinforce that bit a touch. But mostly, I just think that's stunning. And the old over and unders of the days of, well, it's Boss. Boss really made the, I mean, you can see Bosses that come halfway up the forend. It's a lovely touch. Just allows you to flow the engraving out of the action a little bit more. The barrels are 70mm chambers. This is an 18.5 bore. This gun is actually a 2013 built gun. So fairly early on in their gun making career. They built their 100th gun in 2015, so if we go on just the law of averages, this gun might be like in the realms of number 70. Serial number 12046. The gun locks up in a Boss style with two lumps going over the top here as the ejectors go in, and they're locked into the action there. It's a nicely machined gun, and they do have a fairly good reputation for reliability, which is nice. So there isn't a great deal to go wrong. I love the way that even the trigger guard is nicely rounded, and the whole thing is just very pleasant to look at. Fixed choke, 1/4 though obviously they were available with just about any choking at the time. It breaks my heart the Boxers aren't around anymore, but they did leave a good few hundred guns out there that you can see and enjoy, and that will survive them. Their name will survive with these beautiful guns, and they're built to a quality that means they will be around. And I hope they were sort of the vanguard and the English guns do come back into the realms of affordability, because for the most part, they're not that attainable. And these guys certainly were one of the ones pioneering the way. I absolutely love this gun. It's such a nice thing. I say, it's just as good as looking in those catalogues in 2009, 2010 when they first came out and drooling, and it still has the same effect right now. Guys, thank you very much for watching. The Boxall and Edmiston website is still live, so you can go and check what's there. You can see what they did. You can learn a little bit about the history about these guns, how they were built, what was actually on offer. You can sort of, well, you can also see who survived them, the gunsmiths they recommend, and Fox & Coast Bespoke, who essentially are offering the engraving service that they used to offer, but they can do it to other guns, which is quite an interesting little thing. Worth going and having a little look at while away a few hours after you're done with the Holts website. On the trigger guard, there is a bird engraved. There is only one downside to laser engraving, that's when it comes to things like birds, is sometimes it's a little harder to get them bang on when you're doing a portrait like that. Interesting thing with laser engraving, it's fascinating to me how far it has come. Looking at some of the big gun houses and their laser engraving in the start, and now how they are moving on, both in style and quality. Go check this out in the Holts auction. I think it's £8,000 to £12,000, which for what it is extremely reasonable. I presume, to be honest, that this has done very, very little. It's still extremely tight. If you want that little piece of gun making history, but also a really good, solid, usable gun, this could be the one. You know when you pick up a gun and it just, you know. Like I said, a really important part of British gun making history, and certainly I think a gun maker that people will look back on in the future and go, they were one of the first to bring it back. Guys, thank you very much for watching.